Oh, just saw Spider-Man Homecoming. I loved it. I genuinely loved Spider-Man Homecoming on every level. I thought the story was pretty good. There is a bit of a plot hole weird thing. Apparently it's like this movie takes place in 2020, 8 years after the Avengers. Like, that's the only minor problem I had, but everything else I loved it. This is the Spider-Man movie I've been waiting for years. I mean, okay. Through the Andrew Garfield period of Spider-Man, I was kind of like, dealing with it, okay. I saw the first Andrew Garfield movie and I loved it the first time. Several other times I saw it, I'm like, okay, I don't really care for this movie. Amazing Spider-Man 2 I despise, as everyone knows who watches my channel. That movie can die. That movie can burn in hell. It deserves to die, and I hope it burns in hell, as Samuel L. Jackson put it. I also have pizza. I have a slice of pizza that I want to eat. But the car is like an oven, so I think it will be fine. Tom Holland, if you want to just know my thoughts on Tom Holland, fantastic. Just fucking incredible performance as Peter Parker. He nailed it. His performance felt genuine. It felt like a Peter Parker I cared about. It felt like this is Peter Parker. This is Spider-Man. This is Spider-Man. This is a great successor to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. This guy is everything I wanted Garfield to be and more. This guy captures a nuance that we never got to see with Tobey Maguire, as we saw in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. He was graduating from high school to college. In the Amazing series, we saw a little bit of that, but then the second one is like, oh, he's graduating college, whatever. The fuck? Just repeating the same beat. This one's like, okay, we're gonna take our time with this. This Spider-Man's a sophomore. So you got that. This movie, I don't know if it's the best one since Spider-Man 2. Okay, it obviously is the best one since the original Spider-Man 2. But it's hard for me to say this is better than the original Spider-Man 2 and better than the first Raimi movie. I think you could argue it's as good, and I think it is as good as the very first Raimi Spider-Man movie, which is a classic Spider-Man film. I mean, for me to say it's not a classic Spider-Man film would be bullshit. It is. That's Spider-Man. Now, obviously, I think this is the third best of the Spider-Man films. You've got, this has usurped, very easily usurped, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 as the third best Spider-Man movie. Some might say this is the second one, but I think the thing that killed it for me was the musical score. Michael Giacchino's score in this movie was very, very lackluster. I was like, it worked for some of the things in there, but there wasn't like a good Spider-Man theme. Like even the Amazing Spider-Man, even those films had like a decent theme song for Spider-Man. I think I'm just gonna continue the rest of this video from my chair, considering it's bloody hot in this car. Anyway, see you in the chair. So if you didn't notice by now, I love Spider-Man Homecoming. And you have no idea how happy I am to say I love Spider-Man Homecoming. Considering what the last fucking Spider-Man movie made me do. It made me have a complete mental breakdown. What do you offer me different? Well, you offer an entirely new way of how to fuck up Spider-Man. Stop trying to fanboy wank me! It's not fucking working! Which is why I bought a second copy. For it to suffer and die. But that will come later. It will come much later. Don't worry, Amazing Spider-Man 2. You will pay for your crimes. And when you do, you will know the true meaning of pain. I will make you pay for what you did to fucking Spider-Man. Now, we now have 6 Spider-Man movies with 3 different actors playing Spider-Man. Think about how crazy that is for a minute. in less than 20 years. We're not even in 20 years of Spider-Man. Of Spider-Man movies, I mean. And we have 3 actors who've played this character brilliantly. Were some of the portrayals shittier than others? Andrew Garfield, what? Yes. But overall, every actor gave their all in playing the character. And Tom Holland does a perfect mixture of Andrew Garfield and Tobey. The jokiness of Spider-Man in Homecoming works. It feels like the jokiness in the original Raimi movies, where Spider-Man goofs around, makes fun of the bad guy, where he's like, the illegal weapons meeting was 10:30, you just missed it, and starts kicking their ass. That feels like something straight out of the first 2 Raimi films. This is the alternate cut of Spider-Man 2, by the way, that I'm holding here. So, with that in mind, what makes Spider-Man Homecoming so interesting? Well, for one thing, it takes place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And yes, I know there is a time gap problem where it takes place 8 years after the Avengers. So Spider-Man Homecoming takes place in the future, which is a little weird, but you deal with it. Like, it makes you think about how many years has it been since Civil War, how many years has Civil War passed, you know what I mean? Shit like that. With that in mind, you begin to realize that Spider-Man in this movie feels like the Spider-Man that we haven't seen. As I said with Tobey Maguire, we saw him a little bit in high school in the first movie, then he goes off and lives his own life in college, and in the second and third movie, he's living on his own. So we never really got to see Spider-Man early on in high school. We always saw Spider-Man as the adult, as the college student, as the college guy struggling to get by, or the guy trying to hold a job, like Andrew Garfield and Tobey portrayed. Holland's version is a version that is very welcomed in terms of Spider-Man. It says, hey, let's tap into this unexplored material. And the way they integrate Tony Stark in this movie doesn't feel intrusive. Or I should say, it didn't feel intrusive to me. Tony Stark was there as a shadow, as a guardian angel, as a mentor character. He looks at Peter Parker and he sees himself. And in a way, Tony Stark is kind of the Uncle Ben of this series. You could argue we don't even need an Uncle Ben at this point, considering that we've had 2 movie series that have brought up Uncle Ben in one way or another. And considering that it has been only a few years since the Amazing Spider-Man series, maybe we don't need Uncle Ben for now. But when I saw Tony Stark in this movie and how he says, if you're nothing without this suit, then you don't deserve to wear it at all. And you see Spider-Man in this movie having to prove himself. Having to be the Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility in a way so unique in the Spider-Man film franchise that it's welcomed. And I also really like the suit. I was a little worried by all the technology and gadgets in the suit. Like, oh, you're turning Spider-Man into fucking Batman. But let's keep it real. If we go back to the early Steve Ditko and John Romita, especially Steve Ditko era comics, he had some gadgets. He had a little Spider-Man utility belt. He had a little spider signal thing. He had web shooters. That's just how it was. The Raimi films decided to give it the organic approach because they thought the web shooters thing were kind of an unnecessary, stupid thing. Which I do agree with. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying that, but I did grow up with the Raimi trilogy. So from that point, I'm like, the organic webbing just seemed to make more sense. From a storytelling standpoint, yeah, the web shooters do show how smart Peter Parker is, as the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man series attempted to do. However, the thing that I find fascinating, you do believe, and you do buy, that Tony Stark and Peter Parker have this mentor-student vibe. And it works for the few scenes that Tony Stark is in. Talks to Happy Hogan a lot. He's like, oh, I got this internship with Mr. Stark, a.k.a., hey, I'm Spider-Man. Hey, Tony, when you need me, when you need me, when you need me. Because he really wants to prove himself. He really wants to be an Avenger. And the moments that Spider-Man has to prove himself feel like Spider-Man. the way he reacts to danger, the way he reacts to a civilian in trouble, he does something so noble towards the end of the movie that made me go, oh my God. For a moment in this movie, he is more of a Spider-Man than even Tobey Maguire was. I mean, Tobey's version for me is a definitive Spider-Man. Again, this is nostalgia. But when I saw some of Holland's moment as Spider-Man, some of them were ripped straight out of fucking comic books. I mean, Holland as Spider-Man is brilliant. Also, Marissa Tomei as Aunt May works brilliantly. It's a younger Aunt May. Again, you have to do something different with the Spider-Man formula. This is the third incarnation of Spider-Man. So the young Aunt May thing kind of works. She does have the Peter, I'm worried thing, but also has a little bit of a spunk, middle-agedness to her that the previous Aunt May never really had. I mean, yes, Sally Field was younger than Rosemary Harris, but Sally Field also felt like a really old Aunt May, and she wasn't really that developed. With Marissa Tomei, I felt she was Aunt May. They also do a few interesting things with characters from the comics that we've seen in passing, like Flash Thompson, and characters that we've never seen, such as Liz Allen, Peter Parker's first high school crush. And yes, that was Peter Parker's first girl for a time, or implied girl in the Ditko comics. It wasn't Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy was a little later. I got my Spider-Man encyclopedia, I could prove it. But the way they handled Liz Allen in this was so fascinating. And was a welcome change. Because, yeah, people have seen Gwen. People have seen Mary Jane. So, they gotta think, well, what character haven't we shown in Peter's love life? Well, he's in high school. MJ and Gwen were his college love interests. Well, let's throw in Liz Allen. And I gotta say, Michael Keaton, and if you've seen the movie, you'll know why I went from Liz to Michael Keaton, is as good a villain as Willem Dafoe's Goblin and Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus. Keaton's Vulture is astonishing. Keaton's Vulture feels like a guy you could relate to, a guy that felt desperate and fucked over by the events of the Avengers. He has a very interesting monologue going on about why he's doing what he's doing to Peter Parker when Spider-Man confronts him. He says, you think people like Stark care about you and me? We fight their wars, we build their things, and we get the scraps. You believe every word Keaton says with his conviction, with his anger, with his hatred of Stark and the Avengers. You believe that Keaton has seen some shit, and in a moment, you kind of agree with him. Keaton has to be probably the best MCU villain, hands down. One of the best Spider-Man villains of all time. Probably also helps that he was freaking Batman, so that intimidation factor does pay off. When he's talking to Peter Parker for the first time, as just Peter Parker, not Vulture and Peter Parker, there is a twist in this movie that the Spider-Man franchise has never done before. I mean, yes, they've had the hero and the villain know each other outside of their alter egos, such as Doc Ock, such as Otto Octavius with Peter Parker, Norman Osborn with Peter Parker, Harry Osborn with Peter Parker. You know, villains that really do work. Villains that Spider-Man relates to. Villains that Spider-Man may respect in some way. Now, yes, if I'm going to compare it to the Raimi films, and I'm going to try to not do that, but I might do that in a different video. But the point is, when I think of what an amazing, not this crap, but a legitimately fantastic Spider-Man movie is, I think of the first two Raimi films. Because of how they explored the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Because of how they showed Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Because of how the character of Peter Parker was written as a man. That you related to Peter Parker. That you respected Peter Parker. That you could identify with everything Peter Parker did. Tom Holland is Tobey Maguire's successor. everything I wanted Andrew Garfield to be, Tom Holland is. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is fantastically written. You believe every bit of emotion that comes from his line delivery. When Keaton is monologuing or talking with his gang, you believe every word he says. When Peter and Tony talk, you believe every word they say. Every line of dialogue in this movie, every scenario in this movie feels right. It feels organic. This feels like the perfect mix of a Spider-Man movie. In a weird way, it did what the Incredible Hulk did for Hulk. It combined various elements that worked in different versions of the Hulk and basically threw them all in a blender and blended it to make one hell of a smoothie. Spider-Man Homecoming does the same thing for Spider-Man, and it is truly a homecoming. I look forward to rewatching this movie in the cinema again, adding this movie to my collection with pride, not only as a fan of the MCU, but a fan of Spider-Man. It's like, finally, after all these years, I can look at a Spider-Man movie and say, yes, it's great again. This is Spider-Man. This is Peter Parker. These aren't actors playing these characters. These are like if you ripped the characters from the comics and filmed them. I just want to add something really quick before I get to the live long and prosper stuff in the video. I started to really think more about this movie while the current video is rendering. And I started to realize why I actually do love Spider-Man Homecoming the more I think about it. Not only did it bring back one of my favorite characters in a way that felt fresh and unique. Not only did it experiment with characters that have been in the Spider-Man mythos for decades and never thought of a good reason to tap into them. Not only did it do that, but Tom Holland's Spider-Man reminds me of why I love Spider-Man as a character. It's because Peter Parker is your average guy. Peter Parker is not just your average guy. A kid. A 15-year-old kid doing these incredible things. These amazing things. Saving people. Sequences where he just chit-chats with civilians and talks to them like he's a New Yorker. Because that's what he is. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And the thing that made it kind of interesting was the eye movements. This is the first Spider-Man movie, I think, where overall, Spider-Man's mask is what you use to see how he's feeling. Every other Spider-Man movie, he immediately takes it off. Both the Raimi and the Webb films have made this mistake. However, where Homecoming succeeds is that it fits it in such a brilliant way because of the AI suit. Everyone's complaining, oh, it feels like an Iron Man movie. Why is Iron Man in this? Because they have to do it some way. They have to have an in-universe reason as to why Spider-Man acts the way he acts. As to sequences in the movie that make me give a damn about Spider-Man more. But I'm going to spoil the fucking ending. I'm going to have a heavy spoiler warning in this video. Do not watch if you haven't seen this movie. Heavy spoiler. But once he confronts the Vulture, after he finds out that the Vulture is Liz's father, he hunts him down and confronts him. And that's where I told you about Michael Keaton's brilliant monologue. But the Vulture collapses a building on top of him. And there's a moment where you hear Spider-Man say, help. Someone help me. It's a nuance of the character that I've never seen on film. Yes, every time Spider-Man does get his ass beat at some point or another, whether by Green Goblin or Doc Ock. But when you see him screaming for help, and no one's there to help him, and he finds the eternal strength and the willpower to save himself and to keep moving forward, to keep fighting. It reminded me of one of my favorite scenes in Spider-Man 2, where he goes in to a burning building, not knowing, most importantly, not caring if his powers worked, and saves a child from burning to death, almost dying in the process, but at least having the guts and the willpower to save his fellow New Yorker. Holland showed that off in such a unique way. In most cases, we've seen the main villain in a Marvel movie die. At least most of that was a little bit with Phase 2, right? When the Vulture is escaping with a weapon from the archives of the Avengers, his wings are about to blow up. Peter Parker, after the guy's beating the shit out of him, tried to kill him, still says, "Your wings are about to blow up." He's like, "I gotta get this, I gotta get this." And he's like, "I'm trying to save you." They blow up. And he goes through the wreckage to save a man. To save someone that tried to fucking kill him. That moment, that nuance, that epic feeling is epic because of who Spider-Man is. Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same man. And yes, we know that factually, but one of the things I love about a good Spider-Man movie is when it briefly dives into the psychology or a nuance of the character that reminds me why I loved him so much growing up. And it's because he's a guy. He's an everyday man, just struggling to make the world a better place. Well, let's go to whatever the hell I was talking about. So with all that praise, goddamn it, it's hard. I don't know whether to give this a 9 or a 10, to be honest. Or a 9.5. Like, I'm going to give Spider-Man Homecoming a 9.5. It does everything right. I would say it is on par with the first Raimi Spider-Man movie. It is a fantastic introduction to a new Spider-Man, just like Spider-Man 1 from 2002. Now I think, like many of us, if Spider-Man Homecoming was as good as this, then I think the hype for the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming is well deserved. Because it hasn't beaten Spider-Man 2 yet. I look forward to when Homecoming's sequel usurps this movie as the best Spider-Man movie of all time. Maybe my expectations are too high, but I love Tom Holland. I'm happy I saw this movie. And I don't know what else I can say. Why are you still watching my damn review? See this movie. Buy a ticket. Go to a matinee. Find a theater near you if you haven't seen it by now. It's too good to wait for home video. That's the best way I can say it. It's too good of a Spider-Man movie to wait for home video. Spider-Man, welcome home. Live long and prosper and have a nice day.